Right, welcome everyone to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, 11th of September. Before we go on apologies for absence, there is no fire exercise this evening, so if the alarm goes, basically, please use the fire exits as normal. Can I please ask everyone to make sure your phones are on mute or off, so we don't hear them ring. I mean, we're bound to have somebody who leaves them on, but it'd be better if not. Moving on, apologies for absence.
We've got apologies for absence from Councillor Nick Grant, Liz Kitchen, Jonathan Taylor and Belinda Waters.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is minutes. I take it that you've all read the minutes, and I would like us to move to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of July 2024. Do I have a proposer and seconder or comments? Councillor Vickers, thank you for proposing. Councillor Bateman, thank you for seconding. All in favour? Thank you. Declarations of members' interests. Are there any declarations of interest from members? No? Announcements. I have no announcements, but in this slot, basically I've slotted in, so to speak, Councillor Dennis Livingston, so he can bring us up to speed with the Southern Water Co-Design Workshop. A document was circulated which you will all have read, but you may wish to raise questions with Councillor Livingston, and Councillor Livingston will just give us a quick summary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this was a meeting down at Southern Water's headquarters back in July. It was a meeting about organising meetings. I'm trying to hide my true opinion on this one, but it was a design to try to work out how we can have joint meetings with chairs of oversight and scrutiny committees from within all the area covered by Southern Water, which covers Hampshire, West Sussex, East Sussex and into Kent. They were complaining that they get around about 50 requests for to attend oversight and scrutiny meetings per year, and they would like to have some way of communicating better to us. It was facilitated by the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, and they went through the normal sort of procedure, as I've said in my little report. In a time-honoured way, large sheets of paper were brought out and post-it notes provided to response to items such as when, why and who should be able to attend, as well as the possible format for these meetings. Subsequently, I recently had a follow-up report, which I did ask to be circulated, but I don't suspect any of you have received it. Okay,
I think it may have been missed because of staff holidays.
Okay, I'll circulate it after this meeting. But basically, the summary of ideas from participants is we want topic-based scrutiny events, region-wide events with subcommittees, regional events by geography, regional with topic/geography subgroups, series of rotating scrutiny events across the year, quarterly or possibly termly, in person with hybrid elements. And other ideas was scrutiny summits with technical briefings and ONS chairs to be updated quarterly. So there's still conversations are going around about who should be invited, how we link to get the public voice involved into these meetings as well, which some councillors at this meeting were very keen to ensure would occur. There's still a lot to be settled. There's a lot of different views at the meeting. There's a follow-up meeting on Monday, this coming Monday. I unfortunately cannot attend. I'm down in Brighton, not only at the Lib Dem conference, but I'm fortunately at a dentist at that time. So my mouth will be open one way or another. So I would kindly ask if our chairman could attend, please.
It's a bit short notice. Do you know what time and day? You said Monday the 16th?
Yeah, it's in the afternoon, late afternoon. I think it's about, 2 to 4, I think.
Can you send me the details, please? I'll try.
I did earlier on today.
I've not looked at my emails at all today. Been busy walking around the countryside, looking at planning stuff.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, I think Philip first.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Can I just make first of all a statement and then a question? When I first became a councillor 42 years ago, I remember there was a discussion about water, and that there was a huge problem of leakages from pipes, and a massive proportion of water was lost through pipes that needed replacing. And so I rather suspect it's the same old story. Well, it sounds like the same old story, and I wonder whether whether Southern Water and others will ever sing from a different hymn sheet. Which leads me to ask you, Dennis, whether you think this whole exercise of participation from elected representatives is genuine, has some purpose to it, or whether it is to create a veneer of democratic accountability for a body that has become one of many water companies who are, let's just say, having a bad press.
It's difficult to say. Remember, Southern Water were asking for 91% increase in water bills by 2030, which is far more than Thames Water were asking for, which was 76%. I also took a trip around their control room and made a point of speaking to their engineers to try to get a feeling, as a fellow engineer, of what is going to occur in the future and what the plans are. That they admitted they have severe problems. There's no doubt about it. They need to have money spent on the infrastructure. It is failing. There's so much pipework, sewage. They need to, they have problems with the systems that's been installed, and they do still have a lot of Victorian infrastructure that needs update and replacement. And behind my house currently, I have a reservoir, and I asked them about it because they're doing some work on it. And this was a Victorian, put in Victorian times. This is a storage reservoir which is pumped up, and it's having extensive works on it to prevent any ingress into it, and other lining works to it. They were enthusiastic. They wanted to do the work, but I wasn't over the moon that the management would be able to deliver on it. They are a foreign-owned company. It was an Australian company, but I think it's possibly gone to some sort of Middle East combine now. They claimed they haven't taken any dividends out for the last 2 years, but I'm not too sure of that. But I think we have to be involved in these meetings to make sure that at least we are up to date with other areas. We have particular problems with water neutrality, and it may well be have group meetings with those councils who have the same type of issues as us.
Yeah, I'd just say that I think you're right, Dennis. We have to engage with them, but I'm sceptical. I think this is probably a PR exercise fundamentally. Why? Because they know that if there was a referendum today on whether the water companies should be renationalised, I think we know that the majority of people would probably vote for renationalisation of the water companies, and they know that, and therefore I suspect the genesis of this lies in what is fundamentally a PR exercise I think we need to be careful about being swept up into something that is designed to a degree to whitewash companies who don't deserve to be whitewashed.
I do agree, and I also note that it's been quite a few years, these have been privately owned, and the amount of dividends and payments that have gone to their shareholders is phenomenal. And the regulatory authority we set up to ensure that we have some control over these companies, in my personal view, is failing very badly.
Tony Bears?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I don't doubt that this probably is more of a PR exercise than anything else, but I still think it's worth engaging. There's an awful lot going on, both in the clean side of the water supply and the dirty side of the disposal of waste afterwards. And both sides, they affect everyone, but they certainly affect this district probably more than some. Our rivers are badly polluted, and we've got this water neutrality issue. So I think we need to keep listening to what they're saying and engaging with them to find out what they're up to. I don't think we can really scrutinise them very effectively unless there's a legislative framework to do that scrutiny, and there isn't at the moment. Yes, as scrutiny committees, we can ask for the attendance of these bodies, but at the end of the day, unless we have some real powers to hold their feet to the fire, then we're not going to achieve anything in that respect. But I still think it's worthwhile pressing on and listening to that. I've been on several calls with them, and the range of plans that they've got for the future are quite staggering, really. I mean, I know that not all of them are going to happen because it depends on what allows them to take in way of new funding, but it is a huge undertaking that we need to keep an eye on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Councillor Livingston? Thanks, Dennis. I mean, I've just checked. I mean, it looks like it's going to be a Teams conference, so that's fine. And the time seems to work, so I'll take it on board and I'll take it over. I mean, for the members of the committee, basically, my intention is George is better than war, as somebody said. And basically, the more contacts you get and the more people you meet and you know, then you can build up relationships and you can at least find your way into an organisation to understand how it works and hopefully make some decent contacts to talk to in the future. It seems to work with county council, so hopefully it'll work with this lot. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the review of a report on the council's finance and performance, which we'll receive from Dom, who will then sidestep quickly, hand it over to Sam. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start with the finance items that are in the report and then I'll move on to the performance. So in revenue, we have budget pressures in commercial waste, specifically on the 1100 litre bin types and bulky bag income. We have put in place targeted marketing and we've started to see a positive impact as a result of this marketing. Other areas of pressure are season ticket income in parking and income in planning and building control as a result of water neutrality restrictions. Some of these additional pressures are offset by vacancy savings, as well as a £300,000 forecast saving due to a reduction in fuel prices. However, there is a risk that fuel prices could go up again. The current pay offer is less than we budgeted for, and although it's not been agreed yet, it would mean if it was agreed at the offer now, it would mean a budget saving of 400,000. So after all of that, we are forecasting a 350,000 revenue surplus at the end of the year. We're on track for a small surplus and able to absorb any additional pressures. Budget monitoring will continue and as normal every month and is closely monitored by myself and SLT. On the capital, the spend is 18.8% at the end of month 4, and officers are optimistically forecasting to achieve 90% spend by the end of the year. Spend on the Local Authority Housing Fund continues with rounds 2.5 and 3 taking place this year and adding a further additional 8 homes to the scheme. Survey works on the Capital Theatre have picked up pace with officers forecasting a £1.4 million spend during the year. There are internal delays to 8 projects with forecasts adjusted accordingly, as well as work going on in the background to prioritise this backlog of these areas. Debts. So debts over 90 days remain high and they all relate to a handful of larger developers. 2 sites in question there, we've received an application to discharge the conditions of the charges, which will mean that they eventually don't become due. And these are being reviewed by the planning team. Regular meetings take place between finance, legal and planning to discuss all of the debts, and although it's not shown in the numbers in the table that you see, there is quite a lot of progress going on with all of the Section 106 debts. I'll stop there for questions on any of that before I move on to performance.
Any questions from councillors? I did neglect in the emails sent out by Democratic Services to remind people to send in questions. I didn't think it was necessary, but unfortunately, next time I will not forget. But I'll hand over to Councillor Bateman. You have a question?
Yes, it's really just asking for clarity because I didn't really understand the request for the condition to be discharged, and I really just want some clarity as to what does that mean, because I just didn't know.
Not being a planning professional, I believe that because they are not having an affordable element or housing element on that site, they then pay us a levy, and they want to discharge that so that the site then becomes or meets the affordable housing need. So they wouldn't have that.
So if I understand what you're saying is they weren't going to provide affordable housing.
Yes.
So there was a sum of money
Paid to
earmarked
us.
for that.
Yeah.
Which has gone into the accounts.
Yes.
And basically now we're saying they've changed their minds and they're going to provide that housing. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Does that help, Sam? Thanks for asking the question because I was going to ask it myself.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick point really on, you mentioned sales of season tickets are down. Obviously the cost of these has recently risen as well. When you say that there's pressure on that, what does that compare to last year, for example? I mean, are we seeing quite an incremental dip, or is it quite a large dip, or is it minor, or what's the picture kind of looking at compared to previous years, really?
Shall we set that? So the recent prices were in day passes, of course, rather than season tickets, and we are seeing changes between the different types of tickets that people are purchasing. You know, if day tickets are increasing in one place, perhaps people are switching from the old-fashioned season tickets that were 5 days a week or you know, for a full month to a more flexible working. So whilst in one place it might go down, you know, in another it goes up. It just so happens that, you know, overall across every sort of pass ticket type, we've seen a small drop off. Whether that's attributable to the cost increase is difficult to pinpoint.
No, that's fine. I couldn't recall exactly, so I just wanted to see if it was cost related. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers?
A very quick question, Chairman. Clearly, planning applications were down, which is one of the reasons why the income has gone down. Are we expecting that to come back up again? I mean, it's obviously terribly difficult to predict what the numbers are likely to look like. And I know during COVID everything stopped, so there was a proper dip in planning applications. As soon as we came out of that, there was a kind of influx of planning applications. Water neutrality has obviously slowed everything completely down, and it's difficult to predict what's going to happen in the next year or even 2 years. So how are we budgeting for that possibility is what I probably want to know.
I think the answer is with difficulty. It is difficult to predict. We don't know when it might come back on stream. At the moment, the sort of the reduction in income is being offset with some vacancies because the size of the volume of applications is obviously dropping off. Sometimes it's actually the larger, more complex ones that aren't coming through, and there are plenty of small ones, odds and ends coming through. So there is still work to be done by the team, but actually they're carrying a couple of vacancies, certainly in building control as well, because the volume isn't there. So it sort of offsets it. Obviously, when the income comes back on stream, hopefully, we'll need to spend more because we'll need more staff to cope with it.
Can I just come back? And also, of course, the new legislation is going to put the fees up, so there will be a bigger increase in income in that respect once they do start coming in. Thank you.
Councillor Len Ellis-Brown.
Thank you, Chair. One thing we could consider within planning, as other councils do, is that I know the application fee is set nationally, but the pre-app fee is set locally. And what they do, some councils actually have increased the pre-app fee, and some councils generate a lot of revenue through that. So it's something we may wish to consider when we're looking at the review of the planning.
The fees and charges across the council are reviewed each year, so that will happen.
Something separate, sorry. Did you say, I may have misheard you, what has been spent on the capital theatre project to date? I may have misheard.
Oh, they're forecasting £1.4 million spend in this year.
Financial year?
Yeah.
My question is, are we then, the long-term forecast, are we still within the forecasted expenditure of 10 point something million?
Yes.
I must remember not to ask closed questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Councillor Circus.
A couple of things. Because the way these have been printed, some of the slides have been cut off a bit, so it may be that if I had the full slide, I would be able to understand the point. What exactly are calls that are abandoned?
I'm about to go through the
You're about
performance
to go through
bits.
those. I'm sorry, so I'm a bit previous as the...
Yeah.
We haven't got that far yet.
Hold your questions.
Okay.
I'll bring other bits first.
Indeed, yeah.
Well, I've got several questions, as you'd expect. Essentially, in para 1.1, it says basically we're £110,000 short of income on commercial waste. Mm-hmm. Do we know why, and what steps are being done to address it?
On the 1100s, there's been an optimistic budget set in a nutshell, and we are focusing on addressing that and also bringing in offering out the other size containers to recover that income.
In para 1.3, I mean, you did touch on the debt issue about some of it being, my terminology is incorrect, I know, reversing it out basically because they're providing the housing. But there is still a significant amount of debt, which does concern me. And, how do we ensure, you've got debt over 90 days, which is aging with the risk. And, I suppose the question is, how is this allowed to happen? And essentially, how do we mitigate for this in the future? How do we control this? I know they're quite smart. Well, in public session, I won't say what I was about to say, but I mean, we know they pull every stroke that they can.
Yes, and our finance teams, our legal teams, our planning teams are working in a coordinated fashion to try and get more of these companies paying. There is one that is in a repayment plan, so that is slowly bringing that down over 12 or 18 months. We would like to get one or two of the other ones, especially these larger sums, resolved like that. And should these two that we've talked about that may or may not provide affordable housing on site, if they don't provide that affordable housing on site, we will continue to try and recover this money and make them pay.
In terms of mechanisms to recover the money, I mean, I suppose it then becomes a balance between, is it worth pursuing the debt as against the amount of money you spend in getting the money in? Not very clear, but I think you get the gist. Have we reached that stage yet?
Obviously, the larger the sum that you're trying to recover, the more worthwhile it is to try and invest and recover it. But you're right, at some stage you do draw a line. You can't continue to throw money good money after bad if you can't get any traction on it. We would like to hope, though, that our agreements, etc., are secure enough that we can pursue it. And if we have to go to a legal option, then that's what we will consider doing.
Not wishing to, but you may not be able to answer this as a question, then who signs off on that?
It depends on the value, but it would most likely to be Dom on these larger ones or cabinet member.
Thank you. Any other questions, or can we proceed? Over to you again.
Okay, so on to performance. We have 8 amber KPIs and 6 red KPIs. 3 of the 6 that are red sit in the Revenues and Benefits Service, covering areas of arrears collection for both NNDR and council tax recovery. Officers are looking into reasons for this underperformance this year. However, council tax has had an increase in the arrears balance as the cost of living crisis affects residents' ability to pay. And once a taxpayer falls into arrears, it's often difficult to get them back up to date. The service is planning to change the process and send out the reminder letters earlier in a similar way that we did with the NNDR collection, and try to reduce the number of people falling into arrears. For the NNDR, which is the business rates, the appeals provision has increased this year as we received a large number of unexpected challenges made before the 2017 VOA or Valuation Office list closed, and a new 2023 list was created. So businesses could possibly be awaiting the outcome of their appeals before they pay. And the Valuation Office is taking a long time to work through these. The final red KPI for Revs and Bens is quality assurance, local authority error, which is a result of 2 large historic overpayments being identified at the start of the year. The year-end forecast is above the upper threshold, which means a loss of subsidy before the audit has happened. And then finally, the last 3 red KPIs are number of calls abandoned, households in bed and breakfast accommodation, which it reflects the national increase in housing demand, and the number of antisocial behaviour reviews. Now, whilst this is an increase on last year, we view this as positive, as it allows relevant agencies to have a joined up problem-solving approach to establish whether further action can be taken on ASB reviews. Projects and annual plan. So 25 of the 29 projects are in progress, including identifying savings to reduce the MTFS gap, which we'll cover in the next agenda item, implementing the findings of the governance peer review and the office move. 2 projects are on hold. These are a review of the planning committees and the accessible path in Horsham Park, and 2 are due to commence later in the year. These are the providing small business units for start-up companies in the district, and providing move-on accommodation for single homeless people. Questions?
I think there was a question earlier on, so do you want to tackle, shall we tackle that one?
Well, I've got some others as well.
Well, shall we start with the drop calls then, and then Councillor Circus can then...
Yeah, well, Shall I?
Do you want to-
Should we just answer those quickly as well? So an abandoned call is effectively someone phones up and gets through to the first messages that you can listen to, and at that point you can either tap 1 to speak to someone and tap 2 to make automatic payments, etc. If they decide that actually don't want to sit in a call and wait for an operator, etc., then they would hang up. That's could be done for a number of different reasons. So it could be that they just wanted to speak to someone immediately and couldn't, and therefore I'll call back later. It doesn't matter. Hopefully they're not sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. And obviously, if they do wait and wait and wait, then they get through eventually. Depends on however many other people are calling. They might choose to call back at a different time. So we try and it's not a perfect metric. And it's not a perfect indicator really, but it's an indicative of are lots of people really trying to contact us and hanging on for a long time, and that's what we're trying to move the statistic to. How many people are remaining on the call for 5 minutes before they put the phone down, because they probably really want to talk to us there and then.
So in fact, half of being abandoned, they might actually be postponed calls.
Yeah, and we've no way of knowing that.
Okay.
So this was an annual plan item. So when we set the annual plan for 24-25, we didn't actually have the outcome of the peer challenge. So it was implementing any we should have had any findings from there. But I do take your point on the wording. Yeah. That's the next agenda item.
Councillor Bevis?
Yes, Chairman, can I come back to the issue of the phones? There's sort of various words in some of these reports saying we're aware that there are problems with phones. No real indication of what the problems that we're aware of are. But last week I tried, when I was at the CAB, tried to get through to the housing department on behalf of a client. So I went through the switchboard and I took option 3, I think it was, waited a couple of seconds and the thing went dead, and it kept doing that. So are we on top of the problems with phones, or are we still in a situation where they are in control and we're trying to catch up with them?
I'm not aware of any problems of people trying to contact us. Were you dialing a direct line? I wonder whether afterwards you could share that number that you tried to call, and we can look at our logs, etc., and see if there is an issue with that number.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just this call. I mean, the clients I have with me have been trying for days to get through to the council to talk about their housing issues, and they were having very similar problems to the ones they weren't even getting to talk to a human being. They were still working through the menu. So perhaps we could do a bit of a reality check on that one.
Yeah.
I would suggest you take it up with the officers separately, Councillor Bevis, because you have the personal experience of what they've been trying to do, so you can guide the officers as to what the problem is. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. It might surprise you that I'm going to also come at the phone problem as well. But from a different angle. I mean, in the report we've got here, it does state that we have gone to a new contract centre and that we've been experiencing teething problems, which would indicate to me, as I read it initially, that we've got a problem with the provider, which what Councillor Bevis has just said would support that. I've got another, well, truly, does that provider also patch through to our revenue and benefit department? And I ask that because that would also, if that's the case, maybe potentially coincide with the lack of council tax collection, or why we're behind on the KPI. Because if it does also patch through to our revenue and benefit service, then obviously only being open between 10 AM and 2 PM as well during the middle of the working day, and then not being able to get through if you're being cut off is going to hamper trying to collect council tax arrears when people are already behind and trying to make payment arrangements. So that's part of my first question on that. And the second part really is, if we're still experiencing teething problems 3 months down the line, 3 months down the line, I wouldn't really consider that teething problems. I consider that a failure of the system. So I would also ask, do we have a supplementary plan? Do we have a backup plan? Or do we have a way out of the contract and to divert back to an alternative supplier if these continue, if people can't get through to us? Thank you.
Okay, so before we let this snowball roll into a big, avalanche, I think we just need to clarify what those teething issues are. So this is, in the back office side of things, this is about getting data out of the system rather than the actual phone calls itself. So as far as I am aware, there are no issues with incoming or outgoing phone calls. If people can't get through, then that's a slightly different issue to it not connecting in any way. So my understanding is there is no issue with the telephone system that we are operating. In terms of revs and bends, you picked up there, they are only open in terms of their contact lines from 10 till 2. That's to enable the rest of the team and to the team outside of those hours to crunch through the enormous amount of work that they have to do without being interrupted by someone phoning them up to ask them how they're getting on with their case that they're probably trying to work on. And if you think that's a little bit blunt and that's not a great customer service, what we're trying to do is focus our attention on the customers during those core hours and working flat out around those core hours around it. And for people may disagree with the way that operates, but actually that's the most effective way to deal with the most number of people in the way that we have to. So there are reasons for restricting hours, etc. Ideally, yes, we'd like to be contactable at all times, of course we would, but it's just not deliverable in the way that the service runs at the moment.
We'll have to cover those bases.
Yes, to a point. I mean, obviously, as I read it on the report, the way it's written in the committee report would have indicated to me, as I read it, that there was problems with the system. So that's why I brought up that question. But you've clarified that's
problems with the indicator. That's what we haven't perhaps written that as or expressed it as well as we should have done. But we're talking about problems with the indicator and the data to go into the indicator.
Thank you for clarifying.
That's why we are looking at these KPIs fairly carefully to make sure that they indicate what they're meant to indicate rather than something else. Any other questions, Councillor Beck?
I'm just following up on the opening hours of 10 till 2. I can understand the operational reasons for that, but I'm just wondering what evidence base there is to suggest that the customers are able to access you in those timescales, is that enabling everybody who needs to get in touch, or are there people being inadvertently penalised for their work patterns through those set times? Is there evidence for suggesting that those work for all your people as opposed to evidence that it works for you?
That's an impossible question to answer, isn't it? Someone could work 9 till 5 and, the office or the telephones could be open 9 till 5. Are you suggesting that we, have a 24-hour service so that anyone on a night shift could call us or vice versa?
I guess I would be suggesting finding out from the people who need you whether or not those hours work, and if the evidence is that it's fine, then there's no need to change. But if there are people there saying that they can't get in touch with you in those times, maybe looking to see if there's any way of having maybe once a week a different window.
I'll reflect on your comments and I'll take them away and consider them.
Any other questions? No. I mean, I looking at the budget monitoring and forecast outturn, I mean, the only comments I would make personally on it is the two comments is the debt is one I've already raised, but I'll still go on about it for a while. The other thing is you'll note the capital expenditure. It's the first time I've actually seen the capital expenditure looks as if it's going to be close to what the budget was going to be, because in the past, this sort of number's always been running quite a long way behind, hasn't it, Dom?
It has, but we're only at month
I know
5, so we're forecasting, aren't we? For month 4, sorry. And we are forecasting to the end of the year, so let's see what it's actually is at the end of the year before we celebrate.
Not much confidence in that. The other comment I would make is, unfortunately, I see Burton Court is still in the list of capital projects. How many years has it been floating around?
Longer than we would have liked. I understand, and I don't know the detail particularly on this one. It's not in my sort of directorate, but I understand it went to planning. There was a slight issue with the planning permission, and it's gone back into planning as a result of that. So I don't know if you've sat on a planning committee and seen that go through, and probably know more than me. Maybe.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Sorry, one final question on a different subject this time, you'll be pleased to know. I was just looking through and I can see the comments around the movement from the B&B accommodation, and it mentions that we're implementing initiatives to try and address the lack of movement from B&B accommodation. Just really out of curiosity, what are those initiatives that we're looking at, and what are we implementing at the moment? Thank you.
It's working better with the housing associations locally, so we've got new management, head of service and the housing manager level. They're establishing very good relationships locally. They're actively managing the way in which we put people into B&B, so it's not an easy option for us to do that. We want to do that as a last resort, so we're looking for other solutions before having to resort to that. Then once people are in B&B, we're working with the housing associations to get them out as soon as we can. Obviously, we've still got too many people in B&B, but the numbers are coming down slightly.
Does that answer your point?
Yes, to a degree. I mean, I'm just curious how we're working better with the housing associations, because obviously housing stock in the social sector is essentially non-existent on the market currently. You know, we all know that. So it was just really a curiosity of the different ways that we're actually working with them to try and move it. Obviously, it's a positive thing, and just something I'm quite interested in. That's all on the detail side.
I can probably get you a written answer, which will answer it better than whatever my answer will be.
That'll be perfect. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions, officers? No? Oh, Councillor Bateman.
It was really just to feedback that I've sort of been liaising with the new housing manager, and it's just to say that from our conversations, I just think she is doing a fantastic job. And also I noticed that she was really, really reflective as well, because we noticed that when people are applying for social housing, they don't actually understand the wards that they can apply to, because words like Den, Trafalgar and things like that are pretty meaningless to the people on the street. And she was able to say, we're going to change this so that people actually understand by map where those places are, and we're going to also put bus routes on them as well so that people can understand what they're applying for and if they can make use of it. So it was just to say, I think she's doing a brilliant job. That was it.
Thank you. Any other comments? One question I do have. On the PDAG yesterday, there was a mention of £1 million of savings. I just wondered over the year, and I just wondered where the £1 million is coming from.
My brain's trying to.
So we're talking
think of
here
where we
about the million, well, it's 900,000, I think it is, that we have identified in not spending or raising income in 25-26. Some of that is, the fuel, 300,000 on the fuel bill being lower if the price continues to remain at the sort of the lower levels that we're seeing now compared to the existing budget. Some of it is about car parking increases that you'll see in the next item as well. Proposing to raise prices there by 9%. When the last rise was in 2022, we've had inflation, over a couple of years of 11%, and actually a 9% rise over that period is, a reasonable amount, albeit that we recognise that customers will grumble about, car parking prices going up. So there are several sort of big ticket items, and then there are a number of smaller items of 5,000s here and 10,000s there, where we're trying to make things more efficient or redressing how we work in particular areas and changing things. So it's a combination of various things that the whole heads of service across the whole authority have tried to work and put forward their ideas to see how we try and keep that gap limited.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item before we move on to agenda item 6? Move on to agenda item 6.
Okay, that one's mine then. I'll take it from here because Sam's obviously done some of the.
Thank you, Sam.
Some of the work in the report here is obviously referencing our current position, and we've just heard, haven't we, in summary, that actually we're doing okay in 24-25, but the report about the medium term is obviously more negative, and I probably sit here every year and say that, but it is true. Costs are constantly going up, even with high levels of inflation being built in, salaries going up. We every year we struggle to keep a lid on the sort of the 500,000 to 600,000 or so that are cost pressures each year. And we've got a number of things, as the report draws to your attention, business rate rebaselining, food waste introduction that will cost us. Government still haven't told us how much they will give us for that, but it's unlikely to be the full cost of it. The removal of temporary grants, and we're in this sort of uncertain period, aren't we, before the 30th of October and the budget, where we may know a bit more detail, but then actually we'll only really know when they give us the numbers in the draft settlement in December. In the meantime, and probably not referenced directly in the reports here, in terms of comments that are emerging from government and we're hearing about through two methods. So Jim McMahon, our MP, sort of local government minister, has been talking about changes to the 25-26 settlement, but also they've been talking about multi-year settlements. And the difference here is usually with a multi-year settlement, there's a period of consultation first. And my view, I don't think there's quite enough time to do that, run that consultation before December kicks in and we know the numbers. So if I was sort of leaning towards a particular view, it would be that I think the multi-year settlement will come the following year, and we'll know then with a sort of a more of a certainty about how our funding will change over that period. It points towards a similar settlement this year, but they have now been talking, and Pixel, one of our financial consultants, has been talking about, referencing rather, some of our temporary funding being at risk and possible rather than unlikely that it's cut. So that could be, for example, our new homes bonus could go. We've got less of that now. We're down to sort of 400, 500,000. So that might not be given to us. Or, you know, lowering probably, but possibly removing the temporary funding. And that may happen because government's talking about, you know, the budget being tougher and it being a harder impact. So at the moment, we think the numbers in this report are roughly where we are at now, but obviously things could change. And we've done a lot of work. We just talked about £900,000 worth of savings we've tried to identify to make 25-26 better and being less reliant on the temporary funding, just in case it's slashed in one go. So we're in a reasonable position, but we don't know yet exactly what government will or won't give us, rather. In the background, of course, to that, in addition, we have this sort of longer-term infrastructure decarbonisation works, some of which we will need to do to replace infrastructure, like the refuse vehicles. Can't not run a refuse vehicle and collect people's rubbish. There are sort of scales between what we want to do with the leisure centres, whether we want to just patch them up for a little bit longer, or do we really want to do a full decarb on one of the buildings, two of the buildings, 5 or 6 of them. And we'll need to make those decisions. They may be more dependent on what government gives us over a multi-year settlement. So there are various things that we need to consider and reflect, which is why the future years indicate deficits. I think they will be deficits. We don't know quite the size of them yet.
Thank you, Don. As optimistic as ever. But then we've been down this road before. Any questions for officers? Councillor Circus?
2 items. Well, one's a comment. We look at 1.27, garden waste. I do know that another disposal authority is researching and lobbying to see whether they can get into a situation where at the civic amenity sites in that particular county, they could start charging for green waste. Now, if that would be, I think, a thoroughly retrograde step, but this government seems to have a gift for making bad decisions, so you can't be certain that they won't make a bad decision on this one, particularly given the financial stringencies that were referred to earlier. Of course, the county I'm talking about is Hampshire. If Hampshire went down that road, I believe that's one of the options, because they're talking about closing almost a third of their civic amenity sites. Then if Sussex, and the cabinet member at Sussex told me they were in an equally difficult position on squaring the circle in terms of finance, I just make the point that if local authorities, disposal authorities went down that line, it would have major implications potentially for our green waste service. I just throw that. Hopefully they won't, because I think it would be so unpopular with residents, so unpopular. The other thing I wanted to mention is I just wanted to comment on the question of parking charges. When I was responsible as cabinet member for parking charges, I got a huge amount of criticism, including from the local paper, for increasing some charges by 40%. But when we look at page 71, the proposed Sunday and bank holiday tariffs, we see increases there, not of 40%, not even of 100%. What do you reckon it is? About 140%. I do wonder whether these such swinging increases are justified. And in paragraph 1.29, there's mention of charges being made for Sunday and bank holiday car parks. Many other councils. I mean, how systematic has been the research on this? It's just that I park in car parks run by other authorities, and I tend to find there is no charge on a Sunday or a bank holiday. That's been my experience. Maybe my selection of car parks outside of the district is rather eccentric, but I just wonder how general that is, that other councils are charging for bank holiday and Sundays. And of course, the first comment I made, which is, I mean, Dominic says that charges have gone up by 9%. Well, that obviously doesn't apply to Sundays and bank holiday tariffs, which is probably, as we've said, about 140, 150%.
So some authorities make them free, some have charges that are, Monday to Saturday charges and don't distinguish between a Sunday and a Saturday or a Monday. The usage of a car park, people are now 24/7 people, aren't they? They will drop in and go somewhere and do their shopping on a Sunday. In the past, there were Sundays where, days where people didn't do that, and now they do. So why are we then not charging on a Sunday when people are using it for Monday to Saturday purposes? So there are arguments in both directions, aren't there? And we could sit here and agree and disagree on a variety of things. I think it comes down to one thing really, ultimately, is that if we don't do some charges like this, then where are you going to cut to get the money instead? And we've heard we don't want it to be in the housing sector, we don't want it to be here, and we don't want it to be here. I don't really particularly want to put those car parking prices up, but when you're looking at all the options in front of us, that's one of the levers that we can choose to move.
Well, I just think those increases in charges are penal. They're almost penal charges, given the massive increase in charges that we're imposing for Sundays and bank holidays, given that there are other local authorities who don't even charge anything at all to park Sunday or bank holiday.
But you could stay all day for £3.90. That's the price of a cup of coffee these days.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Chair. I don't often say it, but I agree with Councillor Serkis.
That's all right, don't feel bad about it.
It's a fine line. I understand, we're under budgetary pressures. Car parking charges are always an easy target, and I understand why councils, as an authority, do look at that first. But I do also have reservations, especially in regards to the jumps on Sundays and bank holidays, because usually at the moment, as you rightly say, Dominic, people are 24/7 people now. A lot of people come out and do their shopping on a Sunday, bank holiday. It's usually some of the busiest days we have now. That also means it's also one of the busiest days for our local businesses as well. And obviously, with the cost of living crisis at the moment, there are cost of living pressures. Businesses are struggling with lack of footfall, but it also means that shoppers as well, people that are still coming out and spending money in the local economy, are spending less on average. And sometimes, you've got to put yourself in the shoes of people that maybe have just enough to go out and do a bit of shopping now and again, and maybe sometimes the extra costs. For example, in Perry's Place, if I look at that, £1.70 all day currently, that would go up to £6.70 for the day. That's a tremendous increase, and I just fear we might not be hitting the happy medium of increasing parking charges, but also making sure we're not going to be doing damage to our local economy by decreasing footfall and ultimately moving people further and further onto online shopping. So I'm not saying it's the wrong approach. I'm just saying, are we looking at the happy medium, and are we weighing up the potential impact on footfall to our local economy and the damage that it potentially could cause?
All those points you've just made, all very valid, have been considered, haven't they? In that we could have ended up with a Monday to Sunday parking charges and not having that sort of 3 to 4 hour tariff maximum. So we have gone a happy medium, if you like, because we haven't gone the full hold straight into all day charges.
Which might have been a more elegant solution. I mean, the whole solution of a weekend charge was it was a fixed tariff for the whole day. Whereas this now is introducing more complexity, but fine. Councillor Bateman. Councillor Bateman.
Am I correct that these are the drive-up charges for people who haven't booked in advance, don't have season tickets and things like that? And if so, am I also correct that those charges are actually either frozen or somehow subsidised to enable people to make savings by having pre-booked a number of sessions or something like that? I seem to think there's some scheme that enables you to have set number of trips to the car parks booked and paid for in advance, I think.
Yes, because we have season tickets and other forms that can be used, and they can be used on a Sunday if they wanted to.
Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, yeah, I understand there's a limit to the number of things we can do to get our income up, and putting car parking charges is clearly one of the easier ones in some ways. My concern about the Sunday and bank holiday one is that some people will pay for the 2 hours and rush around and go home, whereas in the past they would have stayed longer and spent more money and done more shopping and had a meal there. It's just an observation on my part. I think at the moment people shop in on a Sunday because they feel more relaxed to be able to go in and spend more time there. But if you're going to charge an all-day fee and a 2 hour fee, they may choose to do the 2 hour one and go home, and that's not going to be good for business. It's just an observation.
Yes, it is. Yeah, you're right. There may be examples like that. There might also be examples, though, that someone might be put off if they just want to pop in for an hour. They'll be put off by having to pay, for 4 hours with the parking. So
The all-day charge is less
currently, but we have a financial deficit to fill. So.
Any other questions? I think the only other thing I would say to members is going to this report, when you reread it again, and pay particular attention to paragraph 1.4, 1.41, and then look at the table in 1.43, which is looking to the medium to long term, and you might think on that later on. It's just for you to think about. Councillor Trollope?
Yeah, it's just a general point. I've always felt that a lot of our income coming from parking charges sort of is sort of detrimental to encouraging people to use other forms of transport. I just leave that as a comment. I mean, it's not really in our interest to tell people to cycle into the town when those that could, because we won't get any car parking charges out of them, will we? So.
I guess we could
I say this is
charging for parking bikes.
You could. I say this is a cyclist. I'm not. I don't know. It's difficult for me to feel a lot of sympathy for putting up the car parking charges, because I try not to drive, and I know there's some other people like me. Anyway, thank you, that's it.
Any other questions on this? No? Well, we'll move on to the next agenda item, I think. Thank you, Don. We'll go on to agenda item 7, which is local nature recovery strategy. I'll hand over.
Hello. Yes, I'm standing in for Councillor Colette Button. She sent her apologies, she's away. Local nature recovery strategy. The UK is one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. Local nature recovery strategies have been created to reverse the decline in biodiversity nationally. Introduced in the Environment Act in 2021, they're a mechanism to identify and map habitats that are important in the creation of nature recovery networks at a local level. A total of 52 local nature recovery strategies are currently being produced across the UK. These will establish a national system of nature recovery networks. The production of the local nature recovery strategy for West Sussex is being led by West Sussex County Council in close collaboration with the districts, boroughs and the Sussex Nature Partnership. Consultation including with the farming community, has taken place over the summer to shape the development of the strategy. Horsham District Council is a statutory consultee prior to the public consultation of the draft strategy. It's anticipated that the statutory consultation period will be late 2024, early 2025. In terms of the legislation, the Council has 28 days to comment on the content of the strategy. To meet this timetable, we're requesting delegated approval for the Director of Communities to make any objections and feedback on the strategy in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Climate Action and Nature Recovery. Once the pre-public consultation draft is received from West Sussex County Council, it will be distributed to the Climate Action and Nature Recovery PDAG members for comment, and depending when the draft is received, be discussed at a suitable PDAG meeting.
Thank you.
I think that basically covers why we're having to take this to Cabinet. This report, in terms of asking for delegated authority, the legislation only allows for that 28-day period, which I'm sure most of you appreciate is not long enough for us to go through our normal governance processes. And it's very important as in terms of nature recovery that we do actually have that feedback to the document. One thing that I would stress, however, is that we're designated as what's known as a supporting authority within the legislation. So we're extensively involved in the development of the strategy, both myself and also in terms of planning as well. One of the things that the strategy will do is help to identify areas where biodiversity net gain can be used in terms of nature recovery. So it's a really important document in terms of the planning system as well, and ties up how nature recovery networks can be developed through biodiversity net gain. But that is by no means the only mechanism. So it will also help to direct any other forms of investment that might come forward. I was at a meeting this morning in terms of the River Ada Recovery Project, which is looking at private sector finance for these kind of initiatives, for biodiversity improvement initiatives. So biodiversity net gain won't be the only mechanism, but as I say, obviously in terms of us being a local planning authority, it is a very important mechanism. So happy to take any other questions that you might have.
It's just a bit of a reassurance, really. I think I heard you say that the PDAG will get feedback in the next 28 days. You know, it may not be very long, but it would be nice to know what's going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we've definitely taken that issue on board. When we received the pre-consultation draft, so we are a statutory consultee prior to going out more broadly for consultation across the wider community. So once we've got that document, we will send that round to PDAG members for comment and review. as Joanne mentioned, if timing allows, we will come to a PDAG meeting. If it doesn't, we'll make sure that that is circulated and obviously ask for a timely response so we can incorporate that into our response back to West Sussex County Council.
Yeah, the reason why I wanted it to come to this committee is because I'm quite concerned over the amount of time that's allowed. And I'm also concerned about the fact that we're feeding into a county council process, if I can put it that way. And I'm quite concerned that our point of view and our data and input is properly regarded and taken on board. And my biggest concern is actually for us to be heard properly and for those messages to be taken on board by the county council. And what I'm looking for from yourself and the cabinet member is some sort of reassurance that us as a council as a whole, all the members, are involved in it as best as possible. Now I realise time is precious, and I would say circulating the document to the PDAG alone, I would think is probably not enough because it concerns all of us. I think it should be circulated to everyone.
That's fine, Chair.
Basically, because I am very concerned, and this is why we have another topic coming on later on, that the onus is all on the county council. Now, I'm not going to get into a long argument about unitary authorities, but as things stand, that is my major concern. I don't know if other members have that same concern as I do. Maybe you can comment.
Could I
Yeah, if you, please.
I think to provide reassurance to members, as I say, within the legislation, that's why the West Sussex County Council are the key, they're designated as a responsible authority within the legislation. We are, however, recognised in the legislation as supporting authorities, and we are regularly involved with meetings in terms of the production of the strategy, as are a number of other organisations, actually. I think that's another important point to make, is that the production of the strategy is very much a collaborative process. So Sussex Wildlife Trust, for example, are heavily involved, as are the Rivers Trusts. Numerous other environmental organisations are part of this process. So I wouldn't like you to think that the County Council are beavering away in a darkened room producing a document that then has only 28 days for us to all comment on. That is far from the case. They've carried out extensive consultation. There's been webinars for, dare I say, also members, actually, but also farming community for residents. They've attended lots of meetings as well. We mentioned it when we had our parish and neighbourhood council meeting with in terms of wider Horsham district. So within the constraints of how difficult it is to reach out to externally, the group that are involved in driving the production of the strategy have tried their best, and that actually also has to be a part of the process. The legislation makes it quite clear that stakeholder engagement is absolutely crucial in the production of this strategy, and particularly in terms of the farming community. Nothing will be identified in the strategy that isn't, in terms of the mapping, where the farming community have to agree to what's included in the mapping, for example. So where there's opportunity areas, it can't include a farm where a farmer may not be approving that, might not, doesn't agree with that. It can only come forward if they've been part of the process. So there are quite a few constraints in terms of what can actually be included in the document, which I think a lot of us are actually finding a little bit frustrating. We already have Wild Horsham District, for example. We have our own nature recovery network mapped. So we will actually probably be a little bit constrained by what's going in the strategy itself. Having said that, we're working very closely with the individuals that are working on the strategy to make sure that we can still go forward as much as we possibly can with Wild Horsham District. And I think in terms of delivery, Horsham District Council is in a very, very strong position in terms of delivery. The County Council will not be the delivery organisation. They are the responsible organisation for putting the strategy together, but when it comes to delivery, that actually falls on a lot of other organisations. And as I say, with Wild Horsham District, we're in a very strong position. So hopefully that provides some reassurance.
Thank you, Helen. Any questions or comments from members? No? Good, all right. Thank you for that response in detail, Helen. That was most educational and good information. Item 8, which is climate action strategy, for a report.
I've got some comments on that as well. So the progress update on the climate action strategy. The climate action strategy for Horsham District was approved in January 2024. The actions in the strategy will help move the district to net zero by 2050 and support the area to become more resilient in the changing climate. This is not therefore a strategy for reducing emissions from the council's own buildings and vehicles. Although the council was responsible for producing the strategy, it is not just a document for this organisation, as the council cannot tackle climate change on its own. However, it does have an important leadership and enabling role. Most importantly, the strategy provides a focal point for action on climate change by residents, community groups, businesses and partner organisations such as West Sussex County Council. During the approval process, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee requested an update on the progress of the strategy after summer 2024. The presentation by the Head of Sustainability and Green Spaces provides this update, although the strategy is accompanied by a 10-year action plan. The update focuses mostly on the actions that are being progressed from 2024 to 2026.
Thank you. Well, I'll hand over to you, Helen, again.
Thank you. I will not go through every single slide, given how long the items, and we've still got several items to go through. So the presentation was distributed with the notes from the meeting, so hopefully you'll have had an opportunity to look at those. As I say, so I'm not intending to go through every single slide in detail, but just as a backdrop in terms of how we've got to where we are now. As Joanne mentioned, this is a strategy for the district. It's not for our own fleet and buildings. That's a really important distinction to make. We have our own carbon reduction programme for our own estates. So this acts as a focal point for partners, community groups to come together to move towards net zero and more climate resilient communities. And you can see on the slide, we went through extensive interviews, consultation last year in the build up to adopting the strategy. The way that the strategy works, and again, this is, I won't go into too much detail, but I think what's really important to note here is the 3 delivery routes. So leadership, that is really the role of the council in terms of where we can take a leadership role on some of these projects, where we will need to work in partnership and where communities are vital in taking initiatives forward. So it really reflects the fact that it isn't just the council that needs to take action. We can't do that, and neither should we be doing that. Often communities know themselves what's best to be done within their local communities, and we're here to try and enable and support that work. In terms of the framework for the strategy, it has in the centre of this diagram the sort of the brown, red, orange colours. They're what's called enablers. So in terms of taking action, we know there's certain things that we need to be able to do. We need governance processes in place. But there's also certain planning and policy documents. Fortuitously, we have the Economic Development Framework. I think that's not necessarily the right wording, but that's on your agenda tonight. Very close links to what we're doing through the strategy, and Greg and I have spoken about this as well. So there are things that we can do as an organisation in terms of that policy framework. Obviously, the local plan is another really important document as well. So those bits in the middle, they sort of set the groundwork. Education, behaviour change, again, another really important thing. Easy to say, very difficult to do, particularly when it comes to behaviour change. And then leading out from that, we have what we're calling systems. So that's things like buildings, transport, energy, waste, land use and water. So some of those are our carbon hotspots. So they're where most of our emissions as a district come from. Buildings and transport are our really big hitters when it comes to carbon emissions from the district. But there's also, we need to look at where we've got opportunities to maximise what's called carbon sinks. So where can carbon be held within the landscape? how can we encourage more of that to take place? And that's through the sort of land use and water element as well. So in terms of the overarching strategy, it contains 54 actions. As mentioned just now, there's a 10-year action plan that sits alongside the strategy. You'll see that most are in that sort of immediate to short-term part of the strategy in terms of taking action. Rightly so, we are, the organisation has declared a climate emergency, and so those immediate and short-term actions are where we really need to be focusing up to 2026, basically. That represents, and I think there was an error in the note that went round to you, so I apologise, actually represents 34 actions within the strategy itself. And as I say, it's those ones that go up to sort of 2026, so those immediate and short-term ones that we focused on in terms of giving you this progress update. Just to touch on this, this is a platform that we're starting to use called One Planet, where we've mapped the strategy, and we will be using that to monitor. So in the future, we'll be able to actually produce dashboards for you produced from the One Planet tool. What we're also doing is linking it through to Lighthouse as well. So where there's initiatives where the council are actually leading, and it's on Lighthouse, we're going to get the two to talk to each other. That's the aim. I'm assured that this is possible. So the officers are only having to do one thing. They're not having to go into Lighthouse for the performance management side that Jack's responsible for, as well as One Planet. So we're trying to make it as seamless as possible. That's the hope anyway. The one big thing about using the One Planet platform is that we can also show how other community groups are linking into this, these sort of shared outcomes. And we've got a workshop on Monday evening with several parish councils and community groups as well, so they can start mapping what they're doing onto this, so that we can show a collective movement, basically. Often as humans, we prefer it if we feel like we're part of something bigger. That can inspire us. So that's what the One Planet platform can also do. And I should point out that at some point we are open to running, sort of an online event for you, a webinar just for an hour online for anyone that might be interested in seeing the One Planet tool in action. Getting some nods. So yes, we'll make sure that we set that up. Okay, and again, this was really just to provide some context for you. So this was a piece of work that was done by a consultant for us, actually putting together some evidence for the local plan. And it shows the sort of interventions that are going to be needed for us to reach that 2050 net zero target. So the dotted line is business as usual if there was no interventions. This also shows some of the things that in terms of government. Obviously, it's not just Horsham District Council. We're actually beholden to a lot of action at the national level. So grid decarbonisation is one of those, and that's the grey line. Really important in terms of moving to more renewable forms of energy, particularly electricity that's referring to. And as a nation, we've made great strides in relation to that. But then moving down, you can see some of the other interventions that are going to be needed and the scale of those interventions that are likely to be required. And that's how that then links into the strategy in terms of the direction of travel. So just to recap again, the enablers, the systems, we're focusing in terms of timescales on those immediate and short-term actions, and then those are the delivery mechanisms. What we're starting to do is also build up targets and performance indicators against some of these. Obviously, that's not possible when we're not actually the lead organisation. So that is another area that we will need to look at. And again, where as an organisation we are responsible for the actions, we're also starting to set up sort of milestones so that we can track that progress. As I mentioned, I wasn't intending to go through all of these slides individually. There's too much information here. But I'm happy to take questions at the end, but also please do contact me separately or the team. We can come back to you with any further updates if some of this information on here isn't clear. We've tried to present where we've actually started work, so that's the in progress. There's one that's been completed, and that's the Green Spaces strategy that Parks and Countryside team have produced. That's for managing our own land. and the green infrastructure strategy that sits alongside the local plan. And there's only a few in here where we haven't actually started any work. There's actually 3 actions, and given the short time scale that this plan was actually only adopted in January, I think we're doing very well in terms of the actions that are set out up to the 2026 target. I'm not suggesting that all of these have been completed, obviously, only the one has. But again, you'll see from the milestones where we're looking to continue the progress up to the end of sort of 2026. One I'll just highlight here is the behaviour change campaign, and Victoria's with us in the room this evening. This is a piece of work that she will be leading on. We do an awful lot of comms, we do a lot of information out to the residents, businesses and communities, but that may not actually result in anything changing. So that's a really, really big piece of work that we will be starting on, and Victoria's got some ideas about how we can start to develop that, and we'll be looking to do more on that in the run up to March 2025. Buildings, again, I won't say too much about that. The only thing that I was going to mention on this actually is that we now have a new sustainability manager, Neil Sefton. He has extensive experience with retrofit, has a background in working with housing associations, so is a brilliant addition to the team in terms of this particular agenda. So that's encouraging people to install energy efficiency measures such as insulation, and then possibly moving on to renewable forms of energy as well. So he's looking at putting together a draft programme. Again, that's one of our big hitters in terms of, we know that buildings emit a lot of carbon in terms of the district. We have a lot of older buildings as well. Transport, this is one of the sticky issues. We're not the highway authority, and I do share some members' concerns in relation to trying to work with county. We will obviously try our best, but there are certain areas where we are directly involved, such as the rollout of the electric vehicle charge point network, which has had some problems, but is starting to gain more momentum now. In terms of land use and water, just to reflect back on the fact that obviously the local nature recovery strategy will link into this document as well, and also wider Horsham district, both in terms of obviously in terms of improving biodiversity, but as I'm sure many of you know, there is a direct link then to climate change in terms of capturing carbon, but also helping to ameliorate some of the effects of climate change, such as flooding. And again, links through in terms of food with colleagues in economic development. So there's numerous departments across the council that are involved in some of the actions that are included in the strategy. So really, just to conclude, there's progress across most strands. There's only 3 where no action has started at all, and only one of those is where HDC is specifically responsible. Few of the significant projects are, I have to say, only just getting underway. So in terms of retrofits, we will be coming back to PDAG probably in January with a draft sort of programme to set out our intentions in terms of moving that forward. Really, really hard agenda, I have to say. We do know we need buy-in from more partners, so we've been focusing really more in-house up to this point, and we do need to start that sort of reaching out. And as I say, some projects will be lengthy and progress will undoubtedly be challenging, and retrofit is one of those. And just to conclude, in terms of next steps, we'll continue to involve the performance indicators and the milestones for the larger projects. We'll continue to build up the information on One Planet, particularly where we're sharing the outcomes with other community groups, for example, and we're producing that annual progress report that in the future we should be able to generate from One Planet. And the intention that I have at the moment, given that we've got an awful lot of delivery work to do between now and the end of 2026, is to review and update the strategy at some point during 2026. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Helen. I think one of the points that we take away from this is the One Planet demo and explainer. Would be quite useful for all members, please. Any questions from Helen? It was a meaty subject. I suggest if you've got any questions on the KPIs in the tables, that you email Helen direct. If you could copy Democratic Services as well, so that we can keep tabs on the questions being raised. But any questions immediately at this point? Tony, Councillor Bevis?
Yeah, I'd just like to emphasise the need to get One Planet a bit more in front of councillors. I mean, it was talked about, I think, the last time this strategy was presented, and that was very early days, and it was very difficult to grasp what was intended. I still find it difficult to grasp. This presentation that we got with this sort of spidery network, I tried to expand it to actually read what those little blobs were, and it just related. So I'm still completely in the dark. So I would say we really need to get councillors up to speed on what this is earlier rather than later. Thank you.
Councillor Bateman?
Just seeking clarification really on when you're talking about buildings, are we talking about HDC owned buildings in only or wider? And if it's wider, that is one heck of an undertaking. And I'm just wondering how on earth it's going to be financed and how it's going to, because my understanding is that it's likely to be well out of the ability of the average homeowner to take on the retrofitting and the upgrades necessary to bring their properties up to the sorts of ratings that they need to be. In fact, in many cases, it's not even financially prudent to do it. They're just, might as well get rid of the building at the cost that it would entail.
So in answer to your question, no, it's not HDC buildings. This strategy is for the district as a whole. And yes, it is a massive task that nobody has cracked yet. But nationally, it is something that nationally we need to do. And so we will need to work in partnership quite clearly. As a council, we're way too small to be able to take an initiative like this forward. And that we're at the very early stages of talking to our colleagues in the district and boroughs across West Sussex as to how we can do this jointly. We also need to look at the skills agenda. So it links very strongly into economic development because we need those local skills and local jobs, those local opportunities for people to be able to have a local supply chain. And yes, I'm not ducking the fact that it is a massive task, but one which nationally we need to grasp the nettle on. In terms of financing, there are some innovative types of financing coming forward. And again, that's something that we will just need to be working with others on. I know Bristol, for example, the wider sort of Bristol area have got some really interesting financial models that they're using. So the West Country are doing a lot in terms of this agenda, so we want to learn from others. There's no point in reinventing the wheel. And it could be that actually this, ultimately, I have a gut feeling will end up being something Sussex, pan-Sussex. So, you know, we're very much at the start of that journey. There is finance available for those that are in fuel poverty. So if you're in a property that has poor energy efficiency in terms of their energy performance certificate and on a lower income, there is financial support available. And that's where the government support up to this point has been targeted, understandably so, I have to say. But it is that sort of wider population that it will undoubtedly be challenging, definitely. And I'm not ducking that at all.
Thank you, Helen. Any other questions? Councillor Circus?
When I was going through this, I wasn't quite sure I understood under waste what's meant by explore creation of shared economy.
Apologies. Yeah, so that can be taken at various scales. So in terms of a shared economy, we're looking at things like the library of things, where you may not go out and buy a piece of equipment that you only use once to DIY in your property. You borrow it as you would borrow a book. So that's at one scale in terms of a shared economy. The wider scale of it is actually where you look at materials that flow through the economy. And that can be business to business materials. And so in London, for example, that's something that the London councils have started to map out. An obvious example is business A doesn't need that pallet anymore, business B needs it. And that, I know that's a very poor example because you've got pallet businesses that's what they do. But that's the sort of principle. So you're actually looking at how materials flow through the economy. And what you're trying to do is stop them going to landfill and possibly not even recycled, because actually that in itself uses energy. So one business's waste could be another business's opportunity, and it's complex. But that, as I say, the London authorities have started that process.
Can I just ask, is this another name for the whole agenda that I've spent a lot of time trying to push, which is the reuse agenda?
Absolutely.
Which is called the, what was the expression for it? The circular economy. Yeah, it's all the same thing, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, the shared economy is more at the smaller scale, where we'd be looking at things like library of things, repair cafes, as you say, that reuse, that kind of thing. Circular economy is, yeah, when you're looking much more at the closing that loop, Philip, as you say.
Well, all I can say is if we're really serious about reuse, we need to continue to put pressure on the county council and on Biffa, who have only got one reuse shop. They're thinking of opening another one, or preparing to open another one at Worthing, so I understand, when our neighbouring counties have reuse shops at every single civic amenity site. So, I think we just need to keep the pressure up. I don't know why Biffa can't be, because they had a change of waste contractor. So I'd have thought that had been the opportunity to say, right, you're coming in as a new waste contractor. This is what we expect. We want these facilities at all sites. But we're way behind. Sussex is way behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other councils.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Circus. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you for that, Helen. And basically, as I said, if you've got any questions on some of the KPI and the tables and stuff, please feed them through to Helen, but also copy Democratic Services so that we can see what questions have been raised, please. Well, thank you for doing that. Next item on the agenda is agenda item 9. There was a problem with the arboricultural, I can't pronounce it, the tree contract. And basically, I asked what lessons have been learned. Yeah, what lessons have been learned, and basically we have a report for noting, because we asked for an update on the lessons learned from the previous contract that was terminated by mutual consent in 2023. Are you dealing with this one as well, Anna?
Yes, Chair, I am.
Basically, if you could give us a few words. You have all read the papers, and if you haven't, you should have. So basically, Helen will give a few words, and if you've got any questions, please, then Helen will answer them. Thank you.
Okay. Again, I had every intention of keeping this brief. In terms of, we are currently in an interim solution in terms of providing the, I'm going to say trees as well, Paul, tree services. And we are going through the retender process at the moment. So we're working on the contract and the specification, etc., that's required for that retender process. But obviously what we wanted to make sure that we did was learn from the mutual termination of the previous contract through a lessons learnt process. And this basically sets out the table that's an appendix to the report, sets out the main findings in terms of the lessons that were learnt from that. Some of them, for example, I'll focus on the single lot aspect. So when the contract was tendered previously, all tree services were in one lot that was tendered. We've learned from that process that that was possibly not the best way to take that forward. Generally, because it was a larger scale contract, worth therefore more money, it meant that only larger contractors could apply, could tender for the contracts. We're looking at doing a different approach this time, so breaking the contract down into different lots. So tree inspection, for example, which is an extremely specialist service, would be one lot. There would be another lot that would be the vast majority of the tree works that are carried out, and then a specialist end, which is more around things like ash dieback, for example, and woodland kind of clearance. So that's certainly one of the lessons that we've learned from the process in terms of breaking it up, and that's what we're doing with the contract at the moment. We're breaking it into smaller lots. And we had a market engagement day with the suppliers, and they all agreed that that was still a good way forward, was to go for several different lots. They can apply for all 3 lots if they want to, but obviously that would then be up to them if they wanted to do that. What we didn't want to do was go out to tender without that feedback from the market, but the market was supportive of that approach. So, as I say, yes, Paul, I wasn't intending to go through all these remarks on here. I'm more than happy to take any questions or follow-up comments subsequently.
Thank you, Helen. Are there any questions from the floor? Councillor Lennox-Brown.
Not a question, but an observation. I was pleased to read that you're actually putting a greater emphasis on quality rather than price.
However, it did raise in my mind, what did quality mean? But we won't go there. Any other questions for Helen? No? Thank you, Helen. If you want to escape. Yeah, well, I'm saying if you'd like to go, that's fine, but if you want to stay, that's fine too. Sam? Thank you very much. Pass. The sun's gone down. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 10. Enterprising Horsham Economic Prospectus and Business Charter. I'd also like to thank the Cabinet member for attending. As a new Cabinet member, it'll be an education. And I'd also like to welcome Claire Mangan, the officer who we all know, well, at least some of us do, as having been Cabinet member for Economic Development. It's nice to see it again. And I'll hand over to Claire and Greg. I asked for this to come to the committee because, again, this is another one where we do a lot of work behind the scenes, and I am concerned, and I have expressed to officers my concern, that County Council takes the brunt, is in putting all of this together, and I'm quite concerned that our flavour, our input is listened to carefully and taken account of, rather than just ignored. And I'm quite concerned, and I'm sure officers will try and reassure us, and Greg will try and reassure us about this. I'll hand over to you, Greg. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a short introduction. Thank you.
Fine.
Enterprising Horsham details our new approach to supporting the local economy and driving forward our council plan's aim to build a thriving economy that benefits local people and businesses. Our economic vision is to build a vibrant economy that is greener and fairer for all, where current and future generations are able to thrive whilst protecting, enhancing and enjoying the many wonderful spaces and places that our district has to offer. Key to success will be a one council approach driven through a new business charter that will unlock the full potential of our many talented and staff through better coordination and cross-council working to support the local economy. The business charter will also drive better collaboration with local and strategic partners to help unlock the full potential of external resources, aligning them behind Enterprising Horsham. In this context, the Council will play an important community leadership role in convening and influencing the necessary key players to drive action on the ground. Over to you, Greg.
was also put the mic on, trying to multitask, and thanks, Chair. Right, so you've got the report, and I'm just going through a presentation that will put a spotlight on the key aspects of the report. I'm just going to work out how to use the technology. Move it forward. Well, sorry, it's not moving on my screen for some reason, so I'll use my eyesight here. A little preview there. Right, so I might have to look at this as well. Why is it not working on my screen? This is where I need a grandson to come and advise me on my IT. Right, I'll just turn around a bit that way. Yeah, so what you've got in the report is why economic development. I think it's quite important to take a backward step and to think, why is the council doing this? So I think that's sort of where we go to. Then we've got a shape a new service offer in terms of, there's a range of drivers of change and thinking that is going on that we need to embrace and take on board. Then there's a feedback that we've had the meeting last week with a PDAG last Thursday, which they gave us some feedback on, which will be an update, which is not in the report at this stage, but we'll give that feedback. And then we'll give you sight of the economic prospectus and the business charter, which are the first two documents in what we refer to as the economic development as a framework rather than a strategy. And we'll come on to that in terms of why we're taking that approach. And then we'll quickly talk about the next steps with regard to timescales and over the next 6 months. Right, so I'm going to go there. So why economic development? It's all about attracting and retaining jobs, and that's what, and that's why the council, it's important to the council, is because it's a key aspect of improving the quality of life, and that's what councils are about. And if you've got a good income, you've got a good quality of life. It's also about a purpose, and I think there's a recognition now in a range of research that having a job will give someone a purpose and improve their quality of life in that way as well. And then the third aspect of that, I think this is a new one, I've seen particularly in London, but this is in recent years, that by people having a good job and standard of living, then they can be more independent, and therefore they're not a cost, if you like, to the council and those types of services. So they know in the current climate, that's absolutely key. So I think that's a new one that's always been there, but it's been more of a spotlight on it. And then there's a balance here. I just wanted to put this marker down, and we'll come on to the work at county, but having done this for the last 30 years, it's all about the information and ranges and the range of sets of data that people say it's an evidence base. We've got to look at the evidence, the past trends, forecasts, where we're going, and that's important. But it's not everything. That's just one aspect. So you have to look at what we write down now, what we're writing down, our current plans and what we're saying and what we think. But we also have to look at the ambitions of people around this room and actually feed that into the mix, because if you just look at what's happened in the past and draw a line, you'll reinforce the past. So we're trying to get people to think in a different way, to say, okay, that's where we are, that's where we've been, this is where we are, but where do you want to be? And there's opportunities for that ambition to shape what we do. So I think it was just that marker in that context, in terms of approach. A range of drivers of change, which you all know about over the last few years. There's two aspects there that I'll put a spotlight on. The climate emergency, which we've talked about through the climate action strategy, absolutely key. That's affecting everything that we do. And that's why there's a strong link between this plan and the climate action strategy that we know was talked about earlier. And also, I think, having been here now for nearly 6 months, over 6 months, that's come back to me as something that's very important to you. And it's something that I'm just playing back to you in this document to say, actually, it's a key aspect of what we do. And it's not only in terms of looking at it as a new sector, like renewable energies or the circular economy or the sharing economy, but it's about the way we embed this in everything we do. So I think that's a key aspect to put a spotlight on. And then it's the other one is the shift of the powers of the local enterprise partnerships will be going to county. And that comes back to this county issue, is the county is going to have more resources and powers in this area, and therefore it's critical that we actually work in partnership with the county council to make sure what they're doing lands as it needs to in our area. And there's a danger, and having worked at county in Kent years and years ago, you know they can have it's a one size fits all, and it almost does everything, but it doesn't do anything. And I think there's a consciousness of that at county, that they need to actually understand that it's not one area as a county or one economy, but it's how we actually turn that thinking into action. And that's a challenge for this document and for us as the council as well. So those are two aspects there that I just wanted to sort of spotlight. You've got all the data, you've got the elections, which are important. We've had our elections, the one in America's that is coming up, that will impact on our economy. We have a new council plan with new ambitions in that, and that's been taken into account. Then we have all the other documents which we've referred to that are important that this links to. And I think we've also got all the information and data and the evidence base, and you were involved with work, and a lot of you might have been involved with a workshop in March time where you actually looked at a lot of that evidence to that that work with county and that particular work. And then there's and then there's a way in which we work with other areas as well across the council. So the total the work with county and that work that was happened in March time that will shape the county strategy and the way in which they invest the money. There was a number of things that came out, and about 80 to 90% we can agree with. You know, it fits with our area. It's about the right things we need to be looking at. But there are some gaps in that work, and there's particularly around town centres and the agenda of place. And we feel as economy, you know, the economies are based in places, and the county, because it's county, I think that's a bit of it's an oversight. And it's because they're not as much involved in places as we are. So we've gone back and said you need to include something about town centres and places. You can't ignore that as part of the economy. And there's still some work to do on that. And then there's also a sector focus. And just coming from the days of LEP, and again, worked across a number of LEPs, is they like to go for the science sectors, the innovation sectors, the green sectors, all the ones that are exciting and new. They tend to ignore things like the farming, shopping, tourism, because they're seen as low-paid parts of the economy. Well, in fact, they're not all low-paid, but they're seen as that. So they need to have a hook within their documents. It enables us to work with those sectors because they're important to us and important to a lot of other parts of the county as well. So there's the link to the report on there, which you can see, which you might see already. You've seen that as part of the council plan, what's important to us as a council, and all those points are there. And there's a key theme around the about a thriving economy, so this just reinforces that and takes it further. You've had the workshop, and I think the points wanted to just reinforce that. These are some of the points from your workshop, but it was a green agenda again. That's come across very clear compared to other authorities that I worked in, where it's important, but maybe not as important as it is to you. And again, this is a test. What we got, I'd be interested to have your views on that. So I think that's all that picture. And then all those things, all those things are put into the mix, and we come out with a new economic development as a service offer to say this is what we're going to do with the economy, and these are our ambitions and our key areas for activity. So those are what you see. We've got, as you mentioned before, we've got it's a focus on jobs, and it's about fair and green. Now that's a test for you to see whether those words, they feel right, the words you want to use and be associated with, because it will be you going out there to say that this is what we're about as a council, and you'll need to be the champions for that. The guiding principles there, again, it's what you might expect to see in an economic development plan. So you've got the green prosperity, the development of enterprise and the actual economy in that sense. The quality of places is important. The aligning investment, and that's inward investment both from what we've got already, but also from outside and overseas. And then, as you mentioned before, it's about improving skills. And that basically covers the economic development agenda anywhere. But I think it's important, and it's not an accident, the green is top there. So I think that's, again, it's a test here, we need to get your sort of input into that and whether it feels right. And then the priority actions, and we've got 12 of these, are based on those key areas. Again, it's working with economy, with engagement and support, it's skills and employability, it's a green agenda, the even investment, infrastructure, town centres, and then a sector focus. And then there's also a newer one that is about the position of workspace and the need to get the workspace that the economy needs now and in the future, and that's changing, and it's not quite there at the moment. So there's a role, I think, for us as a council to think about that, exactly what that looks like, and to bring those key players in that area all together to really look at that in terms of what workspace we've got and what workspace we'll need in the future. So all those, that's a service offer, and all those are being put into the plans. Just quickly, some feedback from the meeting last week, that we had on the 5th, last Thursday. I think there was a feeling that the town centre is doing well, and I would absolutely agree with that. Compared to other areas I worked, very strong in our town centre, and I think that needs to be an example on which we can help to drive the economy. There's a change in the pound. There's people who used to be in London that are coming out to live in this area, and that's bringing a strong pound to the area, which is good. There's the need to spotlight a location, and I know in the context of a district, a county or region that we think that we are where we are, but if you go to international fairs or markets or these investment events, if they see you near London and in between London and Europe, that's top spot. So we're in a really good place in terms of access to markets and for international investment. So it's easy when you're in that area to think, oh no, it's fine. We're okay, but that's a major advantage that we've got in this area. And then it's also that issue of workspace. I think there's a sense that we need to actually get the right a type of workspace, that because the economy has changed in the last few years, and the workspace that is needed has changed, and we need to understand that and start to help drive that agenda. And then there's also, in terms of the help that's available, I think definitely we do a lot of stuff at the moment, but there's a sense of comms. Are we doing the comms to get it out there? Well, I think we do the comms, but we're not doing enough. So we need to do more and more comms, and that's a constant, again, from experience. No matter, you can do as much comms as you think you need, and you'll never ever get enough done. So we need to really put a focus on comms and engagement as part of the work we're doing. And then it's that engagement of the council as part of that, that bringing those various networks together, and working with the chambers and the FSBs to understand how we can sort of engage better, to understand what the needs of the council are, and to actually start to have a conversation through which we can enable that conversation where the economy can understand that the council is here to help. And that's not always the case. You talk to a lot of these types of networks, I think that we're just here to stop things and get in the way. So it's really trying to understand, sort of just take that to a new level. So these are the documents, and I'm saying one of the key things that has come out of this is a one council approach. So it's not just the economic development team doing this; it needs a whole council approach, and that's exactly the same for the a climate agenda as well. We absolutely need it's a one council approach. So that will come through as a key theme. So we've got a document which you've seen. This is going out for a period of consultation, which we'll come on to. But it's a very top level document. It's got a vision. It's got, in terms of what we're trying to achieve. It's got a direction of travel. It's got the 12 priority actions, which we've talked about across all those different themes that we've seen. So I won't go through it in a detail, but we can come back to it if you want to pick anything up of that. And there's a bit about working in partnership, which is absolutely key for this, internally and externally. And it's about the way in which, and then there's some information about the plan and about the way in which it will be a move forward. So that's the overarching document that explains everything. And then we have a business charter. And this is one of the first, it's priority action 2, I think, there's just all 3. But this is the first thing where we're actually going to, as a council, we're going to say there's a commitment for us to help the economy. And I know it's obvious to us, to everyone around the table here, but I was saying it's not obvious out in the economy, and a lot of people in the in the chambers and the FSB and and the various groups will think that we're there to get in the way. So we have to break that down and say no, we're here to help. We've got to enforce things on some fronts because that's the law and that's the right thing to do. But there's ways in which we can actually all work together and actually bring the economy to the right place in terms of where it needs to be, and that can't be overlooked in terms of the role of the council in doing that. So there's lots of good examples where other councils have done that to a great impact. So you've got the charter there, and then you've also just got a list of everything we do. So again, it's obvious, but we've got a number of roles, and I think the important thing here is that we're saying what we do for the economy. This is what we do for the economy in terms of landowner or regulation, or in the way in which we lead, and even as an employer, we can lead by example. We're a major employer in the area, so all those aspects are important. But I think it's also on the other side of the equation, we're saying this is what we expect of you. So it's a two-way street in that sense. So that's a business charter that will have what they'll look like. There'll be an internal group that will meet and go through that on a quarterly basis. There'll be an agenda of the issues that we need to have a look at as a council. Across the council on sort of to help drive this forward and drive forward the economic growth agenda. Then there's an external group by which we will actually pull together some key partners to understand what their agenda is. So we've got an interface with the internal group. So that's a quick overview. In terms of the next steps, which we'll come on to, we've got the cabinet report, which you've seen, which is going on the 25th. That's just for a period of consultation, so it's early days, so there's a chance for everyone to influence it. Through October to December, there'll be a period of consultation, and we'll do that through a number of channels. Then in January, we'll do an update of the documents after the consultation, and that will come back to a cabinet for approval, with a view that it's published. The documents will be out there in time for spring next year, and therefore from the 1st of April next year, the team will be lined up and to drive this forward. So that's a sort of a quick overview of the documents and the time frame. So I'll take any questions on that basis, Chair. We've got Claire here as well to take questions or something.
Thank you, Greg. So any questions? Councillor Circus.
Thank you very much for that. Two questions. One is, can you say a bit more about any interface? You did mention them, which suggests there has been a degree of interface with the representative bodies of local commerce. So you've got the Chambers of Commerce, you've got the Federation of Small Businesses.
Yeah.
That's one question, because obviously they can impart a lot of experience about the needs of local business, not just related to Horsham, but to other towns and communities. The second question is that this council used to run an event called Microbiz, which it ran at the drill hall. I don't know how many of you can remember that. It disappeared, but it was run regularly, year in, year out. And the idea of Microbiz was that we took over the drill hall, and we had a whole range of experts on setting up and establishing and furthering small businesses.
Yeah.
So you'd have experts on taxation, you'd have experts on the law, you'd have experts on publicity, all the sort of trades and professions that are relevant to establishing and hopefully prospering in a small business. It was called Microbiz. We ran it it was a regular feature of our offering on as far as the local economy is concerned. then all of a sudden, it disappeared. And we haven't run microbiz for some years, and I wonder whether anyone, I imagine by the expressions that I'm looking at, the answer is probably no at this stage. But is that, the longer question is, is that something worth resuscitating? Because if we're a council really committed to helping people establish businesses and develop businesses, that seemed to me at the time to be a very useful initiative.
Do you want to answer that, Chair? And then
Please go ahead.
Well, Claire can come back on point 2, and I'll start with point 1. The point 1, there's interaction already with the chambers and the FSBs. As part of this approach, we've talked to them already, so they've had the chance to influence this, and they've input into that. We've also talked to the BID in town here. They've helped to shape that and given some really good ideas, and we've picked up on the NFU as well. So the NFU are engaged with this, and they've got some work they're doing, which is going to come into that. So I think, yeah, absolutely, that they will be key. The question, I suppose, what we're looking at is we want them all to come together as a group, and what will be an interesting thing is a convening element that will convene them for our area to say, right, what are you thinking about our area, so we can understand what your issues are. But I bet you it'll be the first time that they've all met as well. And I think that's the important bit, is that when you're getting them to meet and you're building an infrastructure at a local level. But Claire, do you want to go on to point 2?
Yeah, on microbiz. Microbiz finished probably just as I joined Horsham District Council, but my understanding was that year on year it was actually almost like the law of diminishing returns. So they were getting fewer and fewer businesses attending the microbiz in terms of the amount of effort and the resources going into it. So the decision was taken that running our own microbiz just wasn't a good way of reaching businesses, also getting that help and assistance out to businesses looking forward. What we have found is that quite a few authorities actually join and collaborate. So you have, particularly centred on, I think there was quite a few events at the K2 in Crawley. So you get quite a number of authorities all joining together, and you get a much better representation of all the businesses. So I certainly think the idea of microbiz is something that can be looked at and taken forward in terms of this new framework. But I think what underpins it is it has to be done on a wider footing than just Horsham District. You know, we would need to join up with our neighbouring authorities or even authorities outside the county for it to actually really get some good results.
I think it's worth saying that.
Councillor Bateman.
Yes, I noticed that the intent set out for this to be a fair and green thing, but what I haven't noticed is very much explanation about how it's going to seek to be fair, what is meant by fair. Because I noticed there's perhaps an omission as to looking at barriers to participation, for example, of women in the economy and people who are differently able. And so I was just wondering if that might be strengthened so that those reasons why women can't participate are part of our strategy and part of the way we go about tackling getting more people active in the economy and enabling people to be more productive and contribute more and generate more for our area.
Absolutely. I think. No, sorry. It is something that we are aware that we are aware of, and it will be in everything that we do as part of the work. I think it will be interesting to note that, you know, there are certain groups we'll put a focus on to help them because they are further away from the job market or from the economy or from the support. So that's about the comms and the engagement. But the interesting bit at the moment, which you haven't got an answer to, and that's why we've got a framework, because we haven't got an answer to everything, but the levels of inactivity in the economy post-COVID has exploded. And that's not people who are out there with no money. It's people who are in a different situation, and they're not making a contribution to the economy in the same way. They're choosing to stop working, and they can afford to stop working. And that's an interesting aspect of, there's a resource there that's not being tapped. And I think that's one of the things that this work will need to explore. And it's not just here, but that's right across, it's impacting more in the South East, but it's a really interesting trend that we need to start to understand.
Does that answer your point?
I suppose I'm just looking for additional information in there for actually to be explicit what we mean by fair, because it just seems to be a throwaway word at the moment that's not actually fleshed out and given substance to. We add extra detail as to what we mean by supporting agriculture and farming, but we're not mentioning what we're doing for women. So it's kind of a big gap.
I can't remember it there, but we have worked on that. I mean, on that particular example, we are looking at that. So it's about the touch, if you like, but that's absolutely what this is about. And about the next couple of months is getting that document to the right level. So it's not like one big document that will never be read, but it's getting the right touch. So I think we can put more around the inclusive agenda, which will cover that. And I think that's a point we'll take away and we'll put into the mix.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Well, I've got a number of comments and observations, and I've got one question. In the document, when you look at your securing green prosperity, and you've got your priorities in there, if you look at the sector plan, which is priority action 5, you cover farming. You don't talk about agriculture and horticulture, or viticulture for that point. And I'll come back to that in a minute. In the bit about attracting investment, I totally support what you say about allocation of sufficient employment land within the local plan. I mean, this has always been a bugbear of this portfolio, because in my day, and I'm sure it's similar today, the industrial land that we have is about, I think occupancy is about 97 or 98% on the industrial areas, and we need more. And you can see that the new one built north of Billingshurst is coming along quite nicely. The second one to the west of Billingshurst, well, we'll see how that is not so well placed as the first one. So I think those are positive. Moving on from that, when I went through the document, basically it comes back at the end that when I've gone through the document right at the end, you don't actually mention, it's a driver of change. Climate change is actually an opportunity as well as a problem, because climate change is actually helping provide things that we haven't looked at and thought about. I mean, down where I live, every second field is disappearing under grapevines, and I'm not complaining. The wine actually tastes quite good. But basically, there is no mention in the document, and you mentioned it in your summary about sectors not being covered by county. We're not covering them either.
I think,
or not in the detail that I can see.
I think that's the point. I mean, what the plan would be, that again, it's the right pitch, the right level. That's an overarching document for each of the key sectors that are important to us across all sectors and within farming, all the different subsets of farming. There will be a sector plan, so there'll be another document underneath it, and that's why we're having a framework. And we're trying to avoid the old way of having a one document to rule them all, where you write a document, it takes 3 years, and by the time you put it out there, it's out of date. We're saying, look, this is the vision, direction of travel. The other information about the sectors, about the employability, about the engagement, about the networks, that'll come later, and we'll do more detail. But we've got to get the right pitch, so when people do read it, they get a sense of that, and there's a story there that they want to go and read the next document.
Well, hopefully I'll see the word viticulture appear in it. And also don't forget the food economy, because, you know, you've got people making bagels and stuff and selling them.
Yeah.
And you've got all that, you know, people looking to reduce the miles.
Yeah, the
Food
food
miles.
miles, yeah.
Final comment is, and how we support businesses. I, as cabinet member, had enormous difficulty in supporting businesses who were struggling very badly when the landslip took place on the A29, and local businesses in a certain town were cut off. Basically, all their footfall disappeared overnight. And we didn't have in place, we had limited resource and limited ability as a council to do anything about it. And Claire and her team and I worked really hard to help the businesses, and I see support businesses through emergencies, that's good. But I think that's a sector that we need to look at, you know, when we get into that more detail bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at more carefully.
Yeah.
Thank you, those are my comments and observations. Councillor Livingston.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, the thing is, that's what I'm missing is the sort of educational skills. If we're going to get the right sort of economic development we want, we need to have our people with the right level of skills and training, and that's high technology, manufacturing. We don't seem to have any guidance of how we're going to achieve that, bring people up to the skill levels we're going to need for these businesses to come into the district.
Again, that is a priority action within the document, not a lot of detail, but there will be a separate action plan that will drive that forward. Interesting on that agenda, we're not an education authority, so it will be about how we influence others, and our role there will be to convene the key players for our area and have the conversation, one, so they understand us and we understand them, but also that they understand each other. And that will be the issue, that a lot of these groups in that space at our level aren't engaged with each other. So that's our role, we should bring them together and influence. We haven't got control over every aspect of it. There's some things we can have a direct input on, in terms of workspace, because we provide workspace, so we could do that. But on that agenda, it's more about the way we bring those partners around the table and try to actually shape that agenda in that way.
Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you, Greg. Thank you, Claire, for bringing us up to speed and up to date. I hope some of the comments and questions were useful to you.
Yeah, really good.
I certainly look forward to seeing how this progresses and how this moves on.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Chair.
If you'd like to go, please go. If you want to stay, you're welcome to stay as well.
It'll take me half an hour to work out the IT, I think. Another like that, please.
Okay, so the Task and Finish group was set up as a result of a number of insurances that were due to renew in April of this year. There were delays in the procurement process, which meant that terms were only received a few days before the renewal date. And as a result of that, the acting chief executive, in conjunction with the leader of the council, had to make an executive decision to renew the policies to make sure that the council wasn't uninsured, which obviously would have left huge liabilities. We met with officers in June as a group. I think myself, Councillor Clark and Councillor Livingston. Subsequently, we produced a report, and I'd like to thank Councillors Clark and Livingston for their input, and also Aisha, who made it make sense. Anyway, so in a nutshell, the result of the findings of our investigation were that the reason why there was a delay in finishing the procurement process was as a result of several factors. Firstly, this was all done
in conjunction with a number of other local authorities, some of whom were very tardy in providing information. The amount of information that was needed was much more complex than normal as a result of the Grenfell disaster. And also it became apparent that the process may have been started earlier had some of these insurances been on the forward plan. We met, as I said, we met with the with officers, and some of the obviously areas had already been identified internally by officers. So to stop this situation arising again, firstly the insurances are all now on the forward plan. The next time this process is carried out, they're going to work with fewer authorities, so it'll still allow them to benefit from the economies of scale, working with multiple authorities, but just not the numbers that were involved previously. I think during the process, during what we uncovered, there were some issues around escalating, officers being able to escalate issues up the line. I think previously there'd been a delay because a line manager had been on holiday. So, if that was the case going forward, it would then just be escalated higher up the chain. That's essentially it. If there's anything else I missed, Councillor Clark?
No, I don't think you missed anything, John. I mean, I think, thank you for chairing the task and finish group. Is there any questions for John? So, Tom?
I was just about to give you a very short update, 3 very quick points. So we are going out to tender on the insurance next week. We're going out with Mid Sussex only, so a much smaller pool. And you're right, it is on the forward plan for January 25 for the Cabinet. I think we've learnt lessons internally, both on this particular one, but we're also applying those lessons to other contracts that we're doing. We're hoping not to fall down the same hole again.
Thanks, Tom. As a comment, to be helpful, I would say that one thing that officers need to make sure is when they go on holiday, that they need to make sure that the deputies that when they have a voicemail up that says, I'm away on holiday, please ring A for this and B for that, they need to make sure that A and B are not on holiday at the same time as them. Would be quite helpful, as I have found out. Next item on the agenda is an update on task and finish groups, and for that I'll ask Democratic Services, Aisha, to update us because various members are ill.
Thank you. So the group last met in June with the head of leisure and culture, the head of property and the head of housing and communities, who were asked to do further research in relation to the history of some additional leases. This work has been ongoing during the summer. Members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee will recall that there were discussions around the concept of social value and whether this could be put into a framework to be used when consideration was given to new leases on community properties. This has been discussed with officers. The group were due to meet on the 12th of September, but this has unfortunately been pushed back to the 23rd of September, and officers will be able to update the group further at that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. Any questions? You will have seen the email that went out on, Friday/Monday about the other task and finish group, which is working on the policy on expanded fairer play areas and leisure areas. And I think that's all self-explanatory in the emails and the press releases you will have seen. If you've got any questions, you can ask Sam if you want. Any questions? No? We'll move on to the work programme. You will have found in your packs the work programme. It is, as ever, the list of the ones that always come every time, which are basically in bold, plus the ones that always come as well, which are lowercase, and no doubt the work programme will change as the meeting approaches, because no doubt subjects will come up or members might wish to raise items for inclusion in the agenda. Any questions, councillor Circus?
I was going to ask this question the other day when it was on an agenda, but I'll ask it now because I missed it, the opportunity there. Number 14, we've got these appraisals of the Cowfold, Adversane, and West Grinstead conservation areas. No, I'm not. I don't think I am this time. This is. Oh, I do beg your pardon. Seem to be making it.
Well, we'll do the cabinet forward plan in a minute.
Right.
But at the moment we're doing the work programme for this committee.
It's the keenness, you see.
Any points? I know there's a desire to go home, and I am doing the best I can to move the meeting forward. No comments on this one? Good. Cabinet forward plan is in the packs as well. Questions or comments on that? For Circus?
Yeah. It's keenness, you do understand, Chairman. Well, right, appraisals. Conservation area appraisals. Can somebody tell me quite what the purpose of these appraisals? I mean, are they designed to review whether these areas are appropriate to be conservation areas? Is it to consider whether the boundaries of the conservation areas should be changed, reduced or expanded? I'm just, since we've now got a fairly substantial new conservation area in West Chiltington, I'm just interested shall I just leave it for, to be answered at a further?
No, we'll take the question on board.
Yeah.
And I'll ask Aisha. Aisha and I will work on it, and then we'll come back to you with an answer.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the answer off the top of my head, unfortunately. Councillor Vickers.
Can I quickly ask when you do the answer to Councillor Circus that you also distribute it to the rest of us?
So I didn't catch what you said.
Sorry, when you provide the answer, the response for Councillor Circus, could you also copy it to the rest of the committee?
Oh, yes, of course, I took that as read. I would have done that normally anyway. Councillor Knowles?
As the councillor for Cowfold, I also took an interest in this, and I spoke to Catherine about it when she was back from leave, and it's been pushed back. It's just a review. It's part of a review plan. All of the areas are reviewed periodically, is what she told me when I caught up with her, but she is going to come back to us on it further.
Does that answer your query, Councillor Circles, or do you want a more in-depth answer, in which case Aisha and I will go in, find an answer?
I just wonder whether